So we are here in this beautiful shop. It's a craft store. It's totally authentic, and it's Tibetan oriented. And these are only things that are handmade, that are authentic, da 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 da. It's in Newton Center, Massachusetts. And we're with Puni, who owns this place, who started it. We met Puni because she's a universal person, and she's from Tibet. We met her at a big demonstration on the Boston Common back in April of 2025. She was wearing a big hat like that, I think even bigger. And I went over to her and started joking a little bit, but then we found out some cool stuff. She'd gone to Brandeis University, which is right near here, and she met her husband there, and he was Jewish. And what came out was that right on this microphone, it says chutzpah and soul. I think it does. Does it? Chutzpah and soul, and Defending Democracy, which is our YouTube podcast. And she asked about it. She noticed the words, and I say, "Do you know the word chutzpah?" And she said, "Yes, my late husband. We met at Brandeis. He was a real activist, human rights activist." And so I got her to say the word chutzpah. She could pronounce it really well, and that's how we ended it pretty much. But then we discovered where this place is months later. We came in, Johans and I, just about less than 2 weeks ago. And she knew we were coming, and she was just so, she is a person who will welcome pretty much everybody. And she did. And in that discussion, we sat just like this, the three of us, and we started talking about identity. And we thought, wow, the three of us have diaspora identities, meaning that families go back to other places and that it's part of our identity, that we're Americans and something else. And it's a great story to tell. And that's why I'm asking all of us to do it. So I'm going to start with Phuni, and then I'll come around and talk to my own personal. We're going to talk about personal stuff and about the bigger picture too, sort of the micro and the macro. So here we go with handing the microphone to Ms. Puni.
Thank you. Very kind. Yes, this is totally a karmic connection. I really do believe when I went to that protest in Boston Common with three or four of our female friends, we were a little scared and intimidated because there was a sort of text messages going on saying that you have to leave your phone, you have to make sure you have a lawyer's number, make sure your family knows, and so forth, because they were worried about getting arrested or there will be other people, so forth. So going into downtown Boston was a little anxious, but when I got there, seeing honestly a sea of people there who were attending and speaking up and really being in a community who felt like we have to voice what's happening in this world right now. So I feel like that's what I've been doing all my life, in the last at least 20 years or so. The way I came to United States at a young age, 16 years old, not knowing anyone, hardly speaking a full sentence of English. My parents thought that I was going to a place where I was going to be taken care of and sent to school and someday come back and help my family and my community. So that was the goal. My parents left in early 60s from Tibet into exile, the Chinese invasion. Many Tibetans follow His Holiness the Dalai Lama into the diaspora community. They were first arrived in a place called Ladakh, which is being a Tibetan nomad. It was closer to cross that border through northern India, and later they were relocated in South India. So I think sharing a diaspora story is so loaded. It has so much layers of complexity and emotions and joy and resilience. And it's a story of survivors, people who left, whose parents left, and they were born to begin with, they were born in a foreign land. And then they come to another foreign land. And what ties my cultural and social identity with my people, whether my community here in Boston, Tibetan community, whether my community back in Exile in India, or even back in Tibet, is that the humanity of our shared experience as a survivor and people who are displaced. And I have been really focusing on the stories of particularly women in my community who played a resistant role, not necessarily only in the front of occupation or front of, say, a protest or battle, but women who play resistant role in quiet, keeping or upholding the culture, or being the cradle of the society. They are the, soul of our existence. They have helped keep our culture alive, our language alive, our way of remembrance of our past history, right? Like through storytelling, through memories. Even my sister today, I always say, please, she is, scribbling down what she remembered, what my mother told her, what our other relatives told her, because a culture like ours, until recently, there's no documents. It's all like through oral tradition. So I find really, I find power in my heart to be living the history and kind of life I have lived. I do feel the suffering and the pain of what our people have gone through and what others are going through even now. But I also feel common thread. I recently heard somewhere on a news that one teacher was telling these kids about a common string, because they're using that as an analogy to tell other students to talk about what's happening. And what they said was they're using that common string, even though, every one of them have a different experience, because if they're American born here, then if you are person of minority or immigrant, they what's happening with the ICE. Sure. And what the teacher was telling the kids was, if we can put a love in this thread, and the thread is endless, even though we're not experiencing the same thing, sure, but we can hold the space and feel empathy and compassion for others around you who are experiencing this. And this idea of common string, that if we can have a love for everyone, what they're going through. And that is a really powerful thing. And I believe you don't have to be displaced and being in diaspora to feel compassion and empathy for what others go through. Even if you haven't experienced, even, adversary in life. So that's part of my introduction.
And what is the question?
What's the question? No, it's an open-ended question, like I do all the time. And the open-ended question is really for you to share anything similar to that or just your own version of that. Yeah.
So I was born in Colombia. My parents moved to Venezuela when I was 3 years old. So I know since ever uh, feel like an immigrant, that you are different than the others, but at the same time, not that different. So when you are a child, sooner or later you become part of the rest. So I'm also become Venezuelan. Then for political problems, once I already got married and was waiting for my first kid, we decided to move to Colombia. But I have to wait like 2 years. Then with two kids, and I moved to Colombia. I lived there almost for 7 years, and then I moved to the United States because at the end of the day, United States represents the land of the not only about the freedom, but about the opportunities. And nowadays, sometimes you choose the opportunities and probably don't know or sacrifice some things because for other person, you can say that Colombia is the paradise, for example. Also Venezuela, in terms of nature or resources, but the politicians, the dictators, or whatever, and you need to create a opportunity for your children. So we decide once our children reach the high school degree, we want to move. So Boston was in the top of the top. Washington, Boston, or Chicago, those three, we love it. But we decided to choose Boston. I was very welcome from my friend here, Johnny Golding. He's my mentor. So that's it. I'm here.
That's beautiful. And I could see that Puni was also really, really moved by it. Yeah, one of the things I want to say about Venezuela, so my daughter was born there. We adopted her because my ex-wife was from Venezuela, but like an American from Venezuela. But anyway, the day she was adopted, the day she was born, and we got custody like the next day, but we saw her. There was a huge thing that happened that day. And Johans was in Venezuela that day, which is interesting. I found that out. He was in Venezuela on the same day that my daughter was born. Wow. So, her situation, but she only was raised in the United States. But there is that sense of diaspora too, because her parents moved from New York to Caracas, and then the daughter, Madeline, who I married, moved from Caracas to Boston, actually, or, to the East Coast. And then Gabby, who doesn't speak any Spanish, was born in Venezuela, but's lived all the time here. And there is, I feel some connection to Venezuela. I'm going to talk about my Jewish identity in a moment. But Venezuela, there's been 8 million exiles from Venezuela in the last, 20 years. And I met them. I've met them in Colombia, and I met them in Peru, and they were all wonderful people. The ones I met were all musicians. Anyway, the thing about Judaism, Jewish identity, we've been a long-term people, very long-term. We're a complex people with a complex religion. I mean, a deep religion, but a religion that's hard to explain, and a culture that's very hard to explain to other people because of so many exiles, so much diaspora for so many years in so many different countries. And I've made it, I think, in a way, kind of just intuitively, I've made it a habit, or I've made it a practice of explaining in very simple terms to people, non-Jews, about what Jewish identity is. But I've done it in very, very short bites. And one of the ways I've done it, and these are identity issues or philosophy or wisdom from our people that are universal and can be applied in so many situations. For example, there's a famous statement, famous psalm, I guess, a famous prayer, we might call it, from Rabbi Hillel, the elder in the land of Israel, who was there at the same time as Jesus. And the quote is, in English, it was written in Hebrew, if I'm not for myself, who am I? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? It can be applied to so many things. And it doesn't have to be in any way exclusively Jewish. In terms of like the ethnic identity and kind of the tribal identity, we're more than a tribe, but we're 12 tribes of Israel that spread out all over the place. And one of the expressions that's now used is called MOT, member of the tribe, which I like that term. And so in that sense of feeling like a really special identity and being surrounded by Jews, which is very, very, very hard to do, we're probably we're definitely the smallest minority group of religion in the world, and maybe even nationality. We only have across the world 13 million Jews, 13 to 15 million. If it hadn't been for 20, 30 different massacres, Holocaust, exiles, destructions, we'd be much larger, of course. People don't really talk about that, so we don't want to focus on the tragedy. But everybody's been affected by the Holocaust, so all Jews have a type of trauma. And that came out really strong on October 7th in the massacre, in the attack. People took it different ways. But what I want to go back to is, let's say my teenage years, that probably, let's say at age 16, I felt very alienated. And I was in exile, so to speak, from the Washington, D.C. area, Silver Spring, Maryland, Montgomery County, which was very liberal and very Jewish and very new, not new immigrants, but new settlement in a sense, new development. And because of a family tragedy, my parents, who were from Boston, moved back to the Boston area, and they chose a town north of Boston that was very insular and very divided. There were a lot of Jews there, but it was very, very divided. So I experienced alienation, anti-Semitism, and so forth. And then what changed my mind, or what got me lifted, was the state of Israel, but not so much the state, but the people. And mostly what really got to me wasn't the military victories, but it was about the sense of solidarity, about the sense of community, about the sense of shared values in Israel, about Hebrew, later on about Hebrew language, which I loved and still love, and about the way that Jews were becoming, quote, normalized. That was one of the strongest elements, principles of the Zionist movement, was for Jews to be able to fill all parts of a society, not just be the lawyers and the doctors, but also the farmers and the factory workers and the small salesmen and the cab drivers and the policemen and the military and the prostitutes. One of the famous leaders of Israel said, we'll know that we'll have a normal country when the prostitutes are Jewish. And the idea being that we can fill all realms of society instead of being limited and then being scapegoated and where we're meant to feel that we're just one thing, that people interpret us as being one thing. And we're not. So that turned me on, and went to Israel at the age of 18 the first time. And that part of it really, really turned me on. So many parts of it. And not so much the religion, but I would say the first thing that got to me was going to kibbutz. So Israel was the first place that had these collective farms that were run in a very socialist principle. They've changed a lot. And we were up at one in the north of Israel, which is the Galilee. And everybody has heard of the Galilee because it's also talked about in Christianity a lot. And way up in the mountains of Galilee, I looked out over the mountains nearby, and this was at night, and there were just these little flickering lights, which was just so beautiful that here I am in a country that we go back to all those years, and here I am on a settlement that is all Jewish, that is all people of my background who came from all over the world. So there's a comfort to that. Interestingly enough, going back to Venezuela and the flickering lights and the hills, first story about Venezuela, when I arrived the first time, and Johans knows about this, you land at an airport that's on the coast, on the water, and then you drive to Caracas. You go through a long, long tunnel through the mountains, and this is at night, let's say. It was at night for me. And you get through the center of Caracas, and there's these flickering lights. And I thought, wow, this reminds me of Israel. But here's the paradox. Here's the, what do you call it? What do you call it in a joke? The punchline. Here's the punchline. Here's the punchline that the next morning, the next day, we went into Caracas, and it turns out that the people in those flickering lights are actually a slum or a barrio, and that the lights are all these little tin houses or little unrecognized by the government houses that are, tiny houses, but all bunched together. And they may or may not have indoor plumbing, but it's the area that people don't go into. People who are not from there won't go into out of fear. I kind of tried to break away from that, but the point being that there's mystery everywhere, and there's paradoxes everywhere. And so coming back to Buddhism, here we go. We've done from Venezuela to Israel to America to Buddhism, which is very central to Puni. So there's a lot of Jews that have gotten into Buddhism, myself as well. A lot of Americans have gotten into Buddhism. And one of the things that turns me on about it, besides the idea of having compassion and love and the meditation, mindfulness, which helps calm people down and feel grounded, and to not feel striving, but to feel accepting, which is hard to do. Paradox is a central part for me of Buddhism, of Zen Buddhism, which I've been mostly turned on, which is very different from Tibetan Buddhism, but a lot of similar principles. Mm-hmm. And San Francisco, where I live, that wasn't an exile, that was a choice, filled with Buddhist things, Buddhist entities, Buddhist communities. And I got involved in one, and it was one of the most beautiful places in the world. Mm-hmm. Even just thinking about it brings a sense of peace. So in that way, I strongly identify with both Puni and with Johans, because I feel a connection to Latin America and Spanish, and I feel a real connection to Puni and Buddhism, and the idea of being in exile and being oppressed. We have a real common denominator here, and it's really good that we can talk about it. So I'm going to give this back to our host here at her store, Puni.
This is very powerful, and I feel many of us who are now, in exile, and especially coming to different countries until now, many people who are displaced or running from violence in their own community come to Europe, America, or even Asia, different places, right? People go there to find, economic and social freedom, and that's why they travel, try to better their family and their own lives and so forth. And if their native country is, safe and good place, who want to leave their own home? And that's how we all become in a diaspora and so forth. But at the same time, I really do feel there's so much, I used the word before, complexity. There's so much pain and suffering that's also intergenerational. I think especially for Tibetans like us, who are now trying to understand what it means when you're carrying such a generational trauma that comes from a displaced people, right? So many of us, we just, because our country is still under occupation, right? Our people are still have a hope and still striving to lift our people from daily suffering, whether it's imprisonment and speaking up and so forth. So many Tibetans who are living in exile, whether it's in the United States or Europe or India or in any other country, we carry this national, I wouldn't even say burden, national responsibility. We are called to be an ambassador to our own country because we are so, like you, Johnny, so small number of us. And it's by choice and it's by dedication, it's by like breathing, right? We don't even think about when we are, if anyone asks us, who are you, where you come from, we will be speaking right away saying, I'm a Tibetan and our country is still under occupation. Our people are still suffering. They cannot move. They're imprisoned. They have no rights of, rights that we take it for granted. So I do feel there's a lot in terms of mental health, in terms of, this is why I was telling you that we are just had our election, because it's so important for us to exercise our democratic, rights and so forth. And for me, my parents, I feel so much, compassion and empathy and some sadness because they escaped to India and they never had a chance to enjoy, meaning they never had a time to enjoy the labor of their fruit of their labor. In other words, they worked so hard to raise us in the refugee camp in India, and now that I'm here or my siblings are here, we wish we could give back what they have, shown us. They have done for us, and that's one of the things I always feel like when I see elderly people or anyone, I always think of them like, imagining what their stories are like, what they have endured and what they have done to come where they are. And it doesn't have to be only people of immigrant or diaspora community. It could be anyone, who has came from somewhere to, America or Europe, but idea that all of us carry so much of our history, our identity, our culture, and within that frame, I also feel like there's so many things that I don't know, so many things that I'm confused about, want to learn about, whether it's my own faith, Buddhism, I am very eager to learn so many of the nuances that we don't get a chance to learn as a lay people in the past. Today you're in America, everything is so accessible. So in other words, I think there's so much to learn and share within the diaspora community of different ethnic communities. You know,
Did
I'm
your
out.
parents ever get to participate in a Tibetan election? Like you did?
No,
I didn't
no.
think so.
Election in terms of local.
Yeah.
You know, His Holiness, I think, is it 2000? When was it? Honestly, 2000. 2006. I can't remember when he stopped. When he decided to give up being a political leader. So, and His Holiness has given us a gift for all the Tibetans to have the right to choose their own leader.
Oh, and okay.
You know, in the past, His Holiness was the temporal and the religious leader.
Yeah.
And he decided that he wants to give the power to the people and have them choose. And we are so, 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 so fortunate and so grateful for His Holiness for the last 90 years have given his life to his people and the cause of Tibet. And he's been guiding light not only for the Tibetan people, but all the people in the world because of what he represents in terms of compassion, empathy, and nonviolence, and the way he approaches. And he is such an incredible, advocate of whether it's a climate, global warming and climate change, whether it's about, he has been out there speaking and doing the work. Unlike other leaders, I really feel like His Holiness has done more than I cannot imagine the life that he has led. So because of his blessing, that's we as a Tibetan, that's why where we are. And it's our moral and ethical duty to speak up and do our part, not only for the Tibetan people, but people, whoever is going through and being oppressed. It's our duty, and it's not about, right and wrong. It's just, it is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to say something about learning something new that, there's so many new things to learn, just like you said. There's many things I know, many things I don't know. And last night, one of the things I learned, it was a class that started, and this is an unusual class, in community education at Lexington High School. And it was a non-Jewish guy who's a retired engineering professor at MIT, but has taken a lifelong interest about Jewish-Christian relations and wants to really be very honest and very direct about Christian anti-Semitism over the years, which most people don't know, and certainly Christians don't know. But most Jews don't know how long and how many different aspects there were. So that was depressing, and I got a little bit, a little bit in a down mood, a little bit, but not much, because the guy was a really fun guy, the teacher. And I've known a lot of the things, but what was most outstanding, besides feeling, some mellowness, not mellowness, but what's the word? I can't think of these words now. But anyway, there was a really bright thing out of that, a bright moment, which is that, and this I didn't know, I don't think anybody knew, that all the way back when the Roman Empire had conquered Judea, it wasn't called Palestine until later, that the Jews there had really like small farms. They were sort of like New England type small farms. They were never taken over by big farm things like in Latin America, where people were run by a big, huge farm system, but didn't have much individual power. So it turns out the Jews in Judea 2,000 years ago, and up until the Romans crushed it, they crushed it because they wanted all the land. The Jews were small farmers in a kind of collective sense. And I didn't know about that. I don't know who would know about that except a very, very dedicated Jewish historian. And so that gives one a feeling of roots and a feeling of confidence, but also some, feeling of sadness that couldn't last. The one best exile story that I can tell, which is not my own, but identify with, is that on my mother's side, her ancestor, which has been traced, was called Abraham Zacuto in Spain. He was an astronomer, a professor, I think a rabbi as well, and an inventor. And he was way, way up there in Spanish society up until 1492. I think he was born in 1370, something like that. And he was really respected, obviously. And then the Inquisition came. And the Inquisition was when the Catholic Church, through the throne, through Queen Isabella, decided that there were three choices for Spanish Jews who had been there a long time. One was convert to Catholicism. The other one was to leave exile, or the other one was to be killed. So a lot of things came out of that, but the one I'm going to focus on is about my ancestor, Abraham Zacuto. So he moved to Portugal, where Portugal was much more open. And he became the court astronomer for King John, the court astronomer. And he had been, like I said, a professor, by the way, in Spain at Salamanca University. But in Portugal, he rose even higher and was involved in some of the major expeditions. He had some connection with Columbus back in Spain and invented some, some new navigational and instruments that were used on probably everywhere afterwards, or after that. I think he was involved with Vasco da Gama, who went around the world, or it might have been Magellan. I think it was Vasco da Gama. Anyway, guess what happens 5 years later? So 1492, now in 1497, Queen Isabella, through her power over Portugal, and had to do with a marriage between the two thrones, she forced the Inquisition on Portugal. So in Portugal, he had the same three choices. He left. And he wandered, apparently, on these boats, whatever, we don't know all the details, to North Africa. There was a point where he got kidnapped by pirates or something. And then he makes his way to the land of Israel. And he stays there until he died. But nobody knows where he's buried. And the whole Zacuto chain of people came together in one big, huge gathering, which I was at, in 1992, the 500th commemoration of the Inquisition, because the Spanish government invited Jews from all over the world who had been descendants of Spanish Jewry. And they came from everywhere. And I had this big, huge banner, which Johans seen, and it's right here, but I think he has it. We can put it in the video, in his nice tricks. The banner attracted a lot of people. I got interviewed, and people from all over, like Bulgaria, from Morocco, who were traced to Spanish Jews. And not all of them Zacuto. But I know that there's a big Zacuto clan, let's say, in various countries. And it's an exciting thing, and I should pursue it more, because it's a source of strong identity and of success in the face of every possible kind of danger and violence. I want to give this back to Johans for a moment.
And this is a big opportunity to do things. I know that we are from different roots, and you have to honor your roots, your ancestors, your past, your culture, your race, your ethnicity. We are honoring our roots but we need to see what we are going to do with our seeds, the things that we can do here as a human being, as a part of the community, because we are different, but we are together. That is something that is not separating us. We are here together with a purpose. And for example, this space, this karma store is a place not only for buying something or to find something or a gift for someone. It's that too, but also it's a place to connect with Puni, for example. Your consultation office is a place to find a friend, someone who can help you. By myself, as an independent professional, I connect every single day with a lot of people. So, as a human being, we are here for some reason. Probably we don't know that sure why, but we are here for that reason, and we are connected for empathy. We are related for the same energy. That's what I believe.
Well, I think I want to follow up with what Johan was saying earlier, call to action. I think for my whole life, people who know me, I've been known as a busybody. That is part of my call to action. I think for me, I don't know where I learned that. Maybe it's part of my survival mode, because as a survivor of abuse, past, right? Like you feel so urgent to whatever is happening, how do I make it better? How do I change things? How can I solve problem? Even though that's very little thing that my own tiny life, I feel like it's important for me, if I can do something, to be a use for anything. So I even tell my family, to love someone. This is my philosophy and my theory, or whatever you want to call it, my 2 cents, is that to love someone is very easy. I'm going to give you an example. This is what I believe. Although to love someone, to have that feeling, that has to be organic and natural. It has to come its own, right? You cannot force someone to love or feel that. So I feel like, yes, loving someone, right? You have that. But to me, I tell my siblings and my close ones, I am so touched you love me. But I would rather see you, I want to see the action. That means not necessarily do something for me. If you love me, what are the things that's really important to me? Taking care of your health, growing, learning, help others, whatever. Like, I feel like love should be showing, right, in call to action. To me, that's my 2 cents, because that's what I saw what my parents did to each other without saying anything. It was all about living their life in example. They didn't preach to us. They were simple people growing up in Tibetan refugee camp, as well as in Tibet, as a nomadic people who tended everything, had reason and call to action. They didn't have a time around to think and ponder and then disappear, right? Everything has a purpose. There is an action. So for me, it's very hard for my siblings and my family sometimes, because my expectations are really too high and unnecessary sometimes, but I believe in even a small way, you have to show someone in a call to action, whatever you can do. Everybody has a different, scale, whatever that is. So my 2 cents, I am so happy to hear you say that. Like, a lot of us can sit and talk about this stuff and share our story, which is great, right? You have to share your story to get to know each other, to understand, what our craziness and nuance is about, right? Who we are and what is important to us. But then, how do you manifest that? How do you, call to action. Everybody has to do their part, whatever that is. And even as a Tibetan diaspora refugee, whatever we can label ourselves, we still, every one of us, have some level of agency where we can do our own part, whatever that is. And no judgment to anyone, however other people are living. But I think to say, oh, I love you, or I love this and love that, like we use these words very lightly, but then there's no action. Like, especially in our culture, you don't say something unless you meant it, unless you're going to do something. And that's, at least that's what we were taught, you know. So call to action. Who's buying soul? Come on.
Oh, nice.
Let me say one last thing, if I can.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay. So last night I was feeling melancholy, but then also that pride. But what I want to say was, obviously bringing this all together about action. Well, all of us have been doing things against what's happening now, especially on the immigration, especially on ICE, on what's the most persecuting and most aggressive and almost Gestapo-like actions that have ever done, have unprecedented in the United States. So we have gone, and I know Puni has gone, me and Johans have gone to demonstrations and protests in front of the major detention center here in Massachusetts, which is in Burlington, you know, a very sort of peaceful or kind of generic suburb. And I happen to live close to it. And this detention center is in an unmarked building. Looks like an office building. There's no sign. It's behind a big, big shopping center, okay? Who would know? But every Wednesday and Saturday, and now even Thursdays, people are out there. And the people who are out there is a real range of people, very diverse, all kinds of different ages and backgrounds, and men and women. And we're becoming more and more of a community. There's real connections. And we're also trying, on the Saturday one, we're also trying to use joy and theater and singing as part of how we're in resistance. Because all of those things, art is part of resistance, obviously, and joy is part of resistance. And there have been times when all of us, I believe, have felt the trauma and the fear of what might happen. How is it? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get really worse? Or can it be stopped? We don't know. And daily, my mind changes about that. Not a very relaxing place to be. Yeah. So it's just a call to action to get past the feeling of trauma.
Now say goodbye.
And Chutzpah Soul wants to do more of these things. I want to bring together more diaspora people and really, really mix it up. And we will always be there, three of us, and we'll invite others. Okay.
Sounds good.
Shalom to everybody. Call to action.